Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bright Green's interviews with the candidates in this year's Green Party executive elections. We're going to be running interviews with a whole host of the candidates, hopefully all of them, that are standing for the various positions up for election this year. Before I introduce today's guest, I just have one request for you, which is to hit the subscribe button that is down below this video. If you hit that button, it means that you'll get all of our interviews, all of the videos that we're putting out, everything that Bright Green does, and you won't miss a thing. It doesn't cost you a penny, and it means that you'll keep up to date with all the rest of the interviews throughout this campaign. So without further ado, I'm going to move into our interview for this evening. So tonight we're going to be discussing with the first of our local party support coordinator candidates, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Duncan Kerr. Duncan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm fine, Chris. We just had a very long council meeting. It started at 10 and finished at 4:30. So that was a bit of a marathon session, wasn't it? So yes, if that's put me in a mood to do this, then nothing will.
Yeah, well, I hope you have recovered from that and are feeling a little bit rejuvenated, at least, before we get into the discussion. So I'm going to start you off straight away with a really straightforward question, hopefully, which is just why are you standing to be the Green Party's next local party support coordinator?
Okay, well, I've been actively involved in the Green Party since about 2009. Got involved in the Derbyshire Green Party, then moved to Shropshire and became involved in Shropshire. I've been elected I was first Green elected in Derbyshire onto what was Bolsover District Council, which was, as you met, Dennis Skinner's constituency. I think there was about 42 Labour councillors, me and one independent. Then I moved to Shropshire and finally enough ended up in Owen Patterson's constituency and became the first Green to be elected both to the town council and then to Shropshire Unitary Council as well. So I've seen quite a lot of local groups, both in Derbyshire and Shropshire. We've now got a separate group in North Shropshire. And I've probably had a feelings about how the Green Party needs to progress. To me, the groups are the heartbeat of the party, but we're asking the party to run a marathon, aren't we? We've got a limited time to make the changes we need to make for a sustainable future. And we need our hearts, our parties to be absolutely ruthlessly focused on getting Greens elected. And I think I can help in that process by seeking this position.
Thanks, Duncan. So one of the things I wanted to delve into a little bit early on was just to get an idea of what your assessment is of the state of local parties in the Green Party at the moment. And I mean that in a general sense. So what do you kind of make of the current strength, the infrastructure that's in place to enable local parties within the Green Party to succeed and deliver the change that you've just talked about?
I think it's very variable. I think it's very variable. We're in an area, let alone across the country, and it's certainly variable across the country. Obviously, we've got parties from everything from inner city urban areas through to rural areas, and they have different dimensions. I've been involved in parties in rural areas, and geography is a real problem to those. I think the Green Party has done fantastically well in giving resources and making those available to parties and training and target to win. I think it's hugely a wonderful resource. I think we've been less honest with ourselves about what we want our parties to do. And that's not we, the centre, telling the parties what to do. It's we, the members of the Green Party, thinking about why do we organise ourselves locally? What's the point of that? And how do we direct ourselves locally? And we're very good at holding to account councils and opponents and the government and everybody else. But I think we also need to be quite robust about holding ourselves to account and saying, are we doing everything we can do to get Greens elected? And I know within parties, there'll be lots of characters, lots of passion, and lots of interest. And it's not that anything is wrong, it's just trying to identify what has the highest priority. So I'd like to see a dialogue, a concordate, I'd even say, between either the region or the centre of the Green Party and each local party, which would identify why that local party is, what its ambitions are in terms of elections over the next 3 to 4 years, what it needs to deliver those, because that's not a same for every party, that will be different for different parties, and how that's going to be secured. And I think for some that will be a very easy conversation because those parties have a very clear direction as to where they're going. For some, it will be a chance to think for the first time or second time about what their aspirations are and encourage them to be bolder. For some, it might be to encourage them to be a bit more realistic if they're too bold. For some, it might be a more difficult conversation, if I'm honest, about people who perhaps have not devoted sufficient serious resources into elections and are doing a lot of campaigning, which is good. It goes hand in hand with elections, but it's not a substitute for elections.
So that last point you made, I think, touches on something that I wanted to raise and kind of discuss a little bit, which is you've mentioned that you think there need to be conversations had with local parties about the support they need in order to do that kind of work that you've just described, and you've touched there upon local parties that aren't focusing on elections as their primary purpose, or perhaps haven't been embedded in the kind of Green Party's target to win approach when it comes to fighting elections. How do you see yourself having those conversations, given that this is a point of contention that has been in the party for at least since I've been a member of it, which has been over a decade now, between people who think that the primary purpose of the party is to get people in the room and get them elected, and those who think that the purpose is slightly broader than that, to fight campaigns, to shift politics in a kind of broader sense. And obviously there's a spectrum of opinion between those 2 points, but that's the kind of poles on that. So how would you see yourself having those conversations with local parties that were on the spectrum, the side of that spectrum that you perhaps disagree with?
In part of my life before I got, as I was involved in politics as well, I've been a social worker, and one of the things you learn about that is when you're going into children's families and you're trying to understand the dynamics that goes on between the characters there and their motivations and their passions, you need to spend some time listening and consulting with people. So what I've always said about what is the raison d'etre for a local party is it needs to walk on two legs. One of those legs is about elections, it's about canvassing, it's about getting candidates, it's about target to win. The other leg, though, is about campaigning. The trick is that those two legs have to go in unison. They have to be in step with each other, and they have to be, they have to be in unison. As I said, they have to work together. If they work together, you can run, you can make very fast progress. I think quite a few of our parties are hopping on one leg or the other leg. The reason I say we have to have the campaign is that's what our point of differential is from any other party. It's because we're grassroots campaigners, and that might be high profile XR stuff, or it might be just litter picks, but it's direct action and it's campaign, it's getting our hands dirty. And that helps us in terms of the election, but only if we've got the ability to take that message forward through having strongly identified candidates and an electoral strategy that can get us the results we need. So it starts with a dialogue. I think it probably starts, given the number of local parties we have and being realistic about this, with a survey and a telephone survey of local parties to try to understand a position statement as to where each party is. And the first question would be, well, what does the party see itself as? What's the party's view of its raison d'etre, the local party? And I don't think in the whole time I've been in local parties, I can't remember a time the Green Party has ever come to the local party and said, what do you think you're there for? It's just always been up where you're there. It's a bit like fish in the water. The fish has always lived in the water, so never ever questions what water is. And the local party have just always been there. They gave birth to the Green Party and just think we're always here. But I really want to just tease out, well, what is your role? What should you be, given that we've got limitations on our times and resources? As I keep saying, climate change isn't going to wait around for us to sort out our local parties. We need to take action promptly. And I think we've got a political appetite to take action now. I think the landscape politically is very favourable to us in areas where we would not expect success. I think I've proved that. I am a member of the Oswald Street Town Council, so right down at parish level. I was the first Green elected to the Town Council in 2013. We now have a supermajority on that council. We have 12 of the 18 seats, every seat won against the Tories in Owen Patterson's backyard. So, the Tories are vulnerable, and I think Labour's are vulnerable. They're complacent, they're old-fashioned. They've run out of ideas very often, and we've got those. So I'm saying we've got a huge opportunity, but we have to have a mature dialogue with our parties about where they see themselves are. I think where the membership, and that might be a bit of a wider dialogue membership about what members see the role of parties are, and then how we can work together to move in that direction. It's not as though everything's suddenly got to stop overnight, but it's being clear about this is what we want parties to be. This is what a good one looks like, we used to say. And this is how we want your party to be. How can we help you? What resources do you need? Where can we build up that in your area?
So on that last point, one of the things that I wanted to ask you was on that point of, I guess, support and resources. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you think is currently missing in terms of the support that the Central Party gives to local parties, and what you think the Central Party should be doing to, I guess, create those successful and powerful local parties that you were just talking about.
Well, yes, there's probably a step which is going back a step before we move forward a step. If you follow my logic, the concept of a whole local party is to get people elected and to campaign, then you come up to the question, well, what is the boundaries? Where are the local parties should be? And we've had a principle in the Green Party of subsidiarity, which is fine. We try and get power down to the lowest level. But where the major objective for a party is to get people onto a council, and where that council is a large unity across Cornwall or somewhere like that, then we need to think about, well, what is the better principle? Do we really want to drive down to have lots of individual groups across Cornwall, or do we want one group that can coordinate across Cornwall with individual support groups? So I think the structure has never really been properly examined against the purpose. I firmly believe you decide what you want to do, and then you decide the structure you need to deliver it. I think we've still got a structure without really got a purpose. So there's a first question about have we got the right structure? And I think for each group, each local group would have clarity about your mission is to get people elected to this council. It could be a district council or county council or whatever. But then that poses questions about have we got the structure right? Do we need to join together? And I say this because we duplicate effort all the time, don't we? The more groups we have, the more treasurers we have, the more membership secretaries we have, the more election strategies we have, the more people who have to do the boring stuff behind the scenes to keep that party together. And nobody wants to do it. There's not many of them. And we just don't need that number of people to do that. We can join, if we can join some parties together, I think we can relieve our parties of some of that rather boring and uninspiring work and get on the more interesting work of actually campaigning and getting people elected. But again, in my experience, I don't think there's ever been a time when the Green Party's come to local parties and talked to us about structures and about the size of the parties and whether that's right for us. So in Derbyshire, when I was in Derbyshire, there was one branch for the whole of Derbyshire. I don't know what the population of Derbyshire was, 600, 700,000. I happened to be right at one end of it. You know, it was miles and miles and miles across to the other side and no realistic prospect of that working. We had district councils in Derbyshire. So if there was an aspiration, it was to get somebody elected to a district. As I said, I was elected to Bolsover, but, you know, that was miles away and very different from Derbyshire Dales and other places in Derbyshire. So I think there should have been a discussion there about is that the right type of structure to have. Shropshire, where I am now, has now got 3 parties, North, Shrewsbury and South, but there's only one Shropshire Council, Unity Council. So, you know, is that right? I don't, you know, these are the questions I think you can go around. And it's not about imposing a solution, but it is about having a dialogue with local groups and asking the questions. And it may be that the groups can just work together on certain issues. They may have still have 2 branches, but have just one website or one election strategy. You know, there are many ways of joining up other than actually pushing people together who don't want to be together.
Brilliant. I'm going to move on a little bit from the specifics of the local party support coordinator role and talk a little bit more broadly about the Green Party and specifically about the Green Party executive. So for those of you who don't know, the Green Party executive is made up of a number of different people who are elected to coordinator positions. So there is a finance coordinator, there is a policy development coordinator, and indeed there is a local party support coordinator. And so members of the executive have kind of overall responsibility for the party's financial well-being, for aspects of the party's strategy, for its reputation and so on. So I wanted to dive into a few questions that kind of relate to that kind of central level stuff, because I think it's important that people understand where candidates sit on those kinds of things. So thinking more broadly, what do you think are the biggest opportunities and challenges that are facing the Green Party right now?
I think, as I was alluded to earlier, politically, I think we have got a great opportunity coming our way in the sense of the empty rhetoric and promises of the Boris era are coming home to roost. I think that a lot of those votes were won off the back of Brexit and frankly a sort of frustration and a desire to get things done. And I think there is a lack of clarity about what the heck the Boris Johnson government is there to do, and when it does do things, it does them quite badly. I don't think the Labour Party is in a position where it can really offer an alternative. I do think climate change has rocketed up the agenda. I say today we had a Shropshire Council meeting. We'd put down a couple of motions, well, 3 motions, but 2 of them very much on climate change and retrofitting, and the Conservatives supported them. That wouldn't have happened 3 years ago. It wouldn't have happened probably 2 years ago. There has been a significant change. The Green Party's issue has always been about credibility. And when I go around the doorsteps, people aren't saying, oh, Greens, I'll never vote Green. People are saying, well, who are you? It's not that the party's a problem to them. It's just that, well, I've always heard of the Labour and Lib Dems and Conservatives. I've sort of heard of Greens, but I don't really know who you are and quite what you would do. So it's a bit about the Green Party showing its credibility. And I passionately believe that the best way of securing that is to have a greater presence on councils. At the moment, you know, Brighton's held up as an exemplar, and it does very well. But I think we need more than that. We need to show that the Greens can be active, and we are active in many other councils as well, and that we can achieve results. And when people see that and have confidence at a local level, they can take confidence at a national level. I don't think we're going to get national votes without getting local votes. We need local votes first, and then we translate those. We get people used to putting a tick next to that sign saying green in the ballot box, and then they think about doing that at the national level as well. Yeah, and I think the pandemic has also had a country rethink about its values, about what it is as a country, and the fact you can live without going abroad every year for your holiday and having a very materialistic lifestyle. Maybe that wasn't so important. I think people are actually now thinking maybe there's a value to community. Maybe there's a different way of doing things. I think the one thing about getting everybody to wear masks and behave quite differently is people are a lot more willing to countenance making difficult changes in a lifestyle. And so zero carbon living now doesn't seem as scary as it probably did 2 years ago. And I think that's not a good flavour we can move with. So I think the landscape around us, the context is very good, but we've got to deliver on that. And I do fear that if we don't raise our game quickly, and I've certainly seen it locally in Shropshire, we'll get greenwash. We'll get other major parties bustling in saying, oh, we'll do all that. We've had all that before, and they've never delivered. You know, Labour, Lib Dems, even the Tories will be claiming green policies, claiming that they're green again, and we will just pulling the votes away from us before people have a chance to side the real party.
So I wanted to pick up on I guess one aspect of that, and crucially in relation to some of the things that you said earlier. So obviously your kind of analysis there was that a key part of the Green Party strategy needs to be building up that presence in local government, getting local councils elected, and you've talked about that throughout. And that's very much been, I guess, the strategic approach of the Green Party for a number of years now. And and naturally, what we've seen is we saw many years of very slow and incremental growth at local government level, with each set of local elections bring a dozen additional councillors in 2019, and then in 2021 that kind of increased significantly to sort of 100 councillors getting elected in one night. But the question that I have around that is, how do you square your analysis there that's the kind of key strategic approach that the Green Party needs to take, of getting incremental gains at local government to prove credibility, and what you were saying previously about the urgency and the pressing need to tackle the climate crisis? Given earlier you said that, you know, the climate crisis won't wait for local parties to get their act together. Well, one could also argue that the climate crisis can't wait for us to win, 100 extra seats out of the thousands there are in local government. So how do you square those two kind of analyses of the party's direction and the planet's direction?
I think we've just got to be bolder. I think the downside of Target to Win perhaps has been that we've been a little bit too scared of actually progressing with more than one target seat. So we've focused all our energies into one target seat, which is great to get the first seat elected, and I fully agree with it. But having got the first seat elected, having got that green in the room, to go from there, as we did in Oswestry Town Council, to a position where we dominate the council, you can't do it one councillor at a time. It would take us 12 times 4, it would take us 48 years to do that on that basis. So you have to be bold, and you may get some losses because you're being bold. It doesn't mean you're completely going back to a scattergun approach of doing nothing, but the next time round, you work hard to have, and I think the next time round, we competed for about 9 or 10 of the seats and got 5 of them. But we put out what the strategy we were following was to put ourselves in second place. Well, we didn't win. Our real strategy was to come second, because our real idea was that always the Tories, even in a place like North Shropshire, where they've been heavily dominant, I think it's the longest Tory parliamentary seat ever in terms of length of tenure, Tories, even there, struggle to get more than 50%. The problem is all the opposition votes are split across, and this happens elsewhere in the country as well. So if you can demonstrate you're the most coherent opposition to the Conservatives, and what that does mean for parties is you do have to be active across the whole piece. You can't just be active on traditional Green Party policies. You have to be active on the social welfare policies, but you have to deal with the other things that local government runs, adult services, children's services, highways, which aren't particularly green, but they're issues that affect people directly, and you have to have some coherent policies on them because people will ask questions about them. So it's a bit about making the party attractive and broadening the church, if you like. So we're moving away from perhaps the dark greens, if you like, or people who've got a clear place in the party, but you're also able to embrace people who are willing to sign up to the green agenda, but perhaps don't come from that strong green background. Like I say, of the 12 councillors we've got in Oswestry, we've got one who's come from the Conservatives, we've got several who've come from Labour, and we've got one who's come from the Lib Dem, and many have come from no party at all. So it's a bit about, you're going to want to be a mass party now. I mean, we got over 50% of the vote in Oswestry. We are going to represent the mass party. We have to look a bit like the mass party. We can't all look like dyed-hard Greens.
So I want to move on a little bit now to some of the, I guess, more internally facing conversations within the party at the moment. I guess the diplomatic way of characterizing what's happened recently at a national, or rather central level in the Green Party is turmoil. So in the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks, we've had 3 members of the executive resign their positions, in addition to Jonathan Bartley standing down as co-leader, and just today Sian Berry saying that she won't be seeking re-election in the by-election that Jonathan has triggered. I don't know where to start with this, but what do you make of that in terms of the implications for the party and for you standing for GPEX for the executive at a time when I guess there's this flurry of resignations that are going on in the central party?
I don't pretend to have an inside track, and I probably know far less than you do about what the motivations are. But running a Green Party is never ever going to be easy. And I think we just need to recognise that. We are seeking to change the world at the end of the day, aren't we? We are fantastically radical and bold in our vision, and that's going to come at a huge personal cost. And there are some along the way. There are some very difficult issues which are going to pose problems, I think, for all parties actually, and will pose problems around gender identity politics for us as well. I don't think. I mean, one thing about the Green Party is it never beholds to a leader and saying we must follow this person because they have the answers to all our questions. It's very much a collective democratic organisation, and it may sound a bit callous, but leaders will come and leaders will go, and people will come and people will go. And I'm a firm believer that people have a time when they can contribute and a time when other people then need to come along. And I've met some fantastic young Green member activists in the party, and I'm sure their time will come. So I know from the outside, anytime anybody in a leadership position stands down, it's seen as a crisis or a turmoil. I don't really necessarily see it in that way. What I am looking for is a party that's confident about its vision and confident about its policies. And I think the Green Party has that in abundance. And I think it has enough people to find excellent calibre candidates to take us forward in the future.
So I just want to follow up on one point of that, and we don't need to dwell on it long, but it's something that you mentioned, and it's obviously something which Sian mentioned in her statement. So you mentioned their kind of discussions around, I think you described it as gender identity issues. In Sian's statement saying she wasn't going to be restanding, she described a frustration. What she just said was an inconsistency between the party's firm position in support of LGBT rights and the appointment of certain spokespeople that took place earlier this year. Now, obviously, as a member of GPEX, if you were elected, you would be responsible for the appointment of spokespeople. So I wondered if you could reflect on that element of Sian's statement, and I guess, yeah, how you see what Sian described as an inconsistency between the appointment of those spokespeople and the party's strong support for LGBT rights.
I think it's a genuine dilemma. It's something I've wrestled personally with for a couple of years now. I think I mentioned I worked as a children's social worker, and one of the things I took away from that was a real concern about domestic abuse. And it's something, when I was a mayor last year, I gave my mayoral allowance to the local domestic abuse service, and I've continued to campaign for the town council to become a white ribbon authority and to be very active in creating a society that doesn't tolerate or condone abuse. So within that world, making safe spaces for women, where women can feel safe, is a very important agenda. And Women's Aid is an organisation itself, which is very much dominant as a women's organisation. So I've come from understanding why those concerns are there, but I'm also firmly committed to the principles of equality and to the principles that somebody should not have to have medical or shouldn't have to have any barriers to pass in terms of longevity of having lived in a different gender from that was on their birth certificate. So self-declaration is something I personally believe in. I think we just have to handle it with consideration and respect for both points of view. I think the Green Party's policy is right, but there are implications in a patriarchal society, and we are in a patriarchal society, for women's safe spaces. And we just have to be creative and try to find ways of making that work. I don't think we can hold back from the advance of giving people equality, but I do think we could take extra time to think about, well, how can we deal with some of the unintended consequences of that action? And I think we're mature enough to be able to find those answers, but we've got to put our thinking caps on to do it.
I guess just one final follow up on this, and as I said, we don't need to dwell on it for long, but just wanted to follow up quickly on it. Is so you talked there, I guess, about needing to have a conversation to bring those points of view together, and I know that the readership of Bright Green and the people who tend to watch Bright Green's videos, are of the view typically that the Green Party's policies in favour of trans rights, in favour of LGBT rights, are the right direction that we should be travelling in. But nonetheless, there is what I would describe as quite a toxic atmosphere emerging in the party around this issue. And I guess the question that I'd want to put to you is, how would you reconcile a position that some people would have, which is that there is a small number of people within the party that are seeking to overturn hard-fought and won battles in the party to get the party to support their rights as trans people, and those people who have been arguing that actually that there are legitimate concerns, as you put it, on this issue. So how would you square that circle when this has been? How would you take the heat out of that, so to speak, when those appear to be, or at least are presented to be, quite contradictory and mutually exclusive positions?
Yeah, okay. Stepping back a little bit, they're not actually contradictory in their essence, in the sense of nobody is trying to deny somebody else their right. They're saying there are some unforeseen consequences from that which may be prejudicial to people. And I don't think anybody's wanting to create a situation where anybody feels scared or loses a service as a result of this. So I don't think you're dealing with a situation where, in essence, you have two people with a fundamentally different point of view and it's a win-lose situation. I do believe that if we can get people around the table and people working a dialogue with mutual respect, we can work out a way of mitigating the worst impacts, finding safest ways of working where women do need safe spaces. And we need to be more active in challenging the patriarchal society. I go back to my work on domestic abuse. I mean, we're living in a country where 2 women a week are killed by domestic abuse, murdered by their partner. I know that we're shouting about that anywhere near enough as a Green Party. We're not, and the society is not active enough in that field. We're treating it as a sort of a women's issue, as a victim's issue. We're not challenging the toxic masculinity, which makes that happen and makes that a feature of society, and then drives a problem because it creates the need for safe spaces. We only need safe spaces because we've got perpetrators who are endangering people. So we need to be more active in challenging that, and then we wouldn't need to be so much protective of the safe spaces. So it's challenging patriarchy, and I don't think the Green Party, being honest, has been active enough in that field. I don't think society has generally. I mean, the government's always making more legislation about domestic abuse, but it's not really about legislation. It's about actions, and it's about the society and how we're treating men and women.
Thanks for that. And I'm going to move us on now, because I know that the primary reason that I brought it up today was just because of today's news with Sian's thing. So I know that our viewers will be well versed in this conversation and have their own views, and we can continue to have these conversations over time. But that's not what we're going to spend all our time discussing this evening. So I've got a few more questions that I want to put to Duncan now. So I've got one more kind of serious question and a couple of slightly flippant questions for you. So the final serious question, it's still on the sphere of kind of where the central party sees itself and where you see the party as a potential GPEX member. So where do you think the party should be placing itself politically at the moment? You've talked earlier about the current context of the Boris Johnson government, of the kind of weakness of the Labour Party. Where do you see the Green Party sitting within the wider political context, and where do you think it should be situating itself to build a coalition of voters that can win elections and do all the things that we've been talking about this evening?
Well, for people who use political rhetoric, we're a radical socialist party. I've no difficulty about that. But I don't think those terms, radical might be, I don't think the term socialist actually resonates very much with many people these days. It's the term they don't really has meaning for people. It is for politicos who study these things and know where your reference points are. So I think it's about representing that communal approach, that anti-capitalist approach, that approach which values individuals, that treats each person as a person who is unique and has meaning in themselves, and actually challenges the power that is taken by businesses that has brought about climate catastrophe and threatens, and the power that's taken by the military and by the state as well. So I think we can do all that, and I think we can build a consensus for that. You might be surprised by that, but I genuinely think we can. But you start it by, and I keep going on about this, by showing credibility at a local level. Because it's not that people have problems with big ideas. They just say, well, that's fine, but are you going to get my bin emptied when my bin's not being emptied or whatever? They need to see that you're actually capable at the very local level of making a difference and making a change, and it's actually hanging together.
So I told you that I'd finish on a couple of flippant questions. So the first of those is, who in the Green Party inspires you the most?
Oh, I don't know. Amelia Womack has been over, and I've always found Amelia quite inspirational.
Brilliant. I'm sure Amelia will be happy to hear that. And the second of my flippant questions is, you're standing to be the Green Party's next local party support coordinator. What is your favourite local party?
Oh, God, I don't think I can answer that. Favourite local party? Yeah, I don't know enough local parties. That would be very, very cruel, wouldn't it, to try and say?
A very politician's answer on that last one. Well, thank you so much, Duncan. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you this evening.
Thank you, Chris, for great questions and good bookshop, good bookshelf you've got behind you. I've got a bare wall behind me.
Thanks very much. So that's it for this evening. Hopefully you've enjoyed our conversation. If you disagree with anything that Duncan has said, if you agree with anything that Duncan has said, please do pop it in the comments down below and get a conversation started down there. As I said at the start, we're going to try and hopefully have interviews with as many of the GPEX candidates as possible. We will shortly be having an interview with one of the other candidates for local party support coordinator, the job share ticket of my memory has escaped me. Lindsay McAteer and Daniel Laycock. I believe that will be this weekend, so keep an eye out for that. The best way to make sure that you can keep an eye out for that is by going down below and hitting that subscribe button. It means that you won't miss a single one of our interviews with GPEX candidates or any of the videos that we put out. The final thing for me to say is that Bright Green is not backed by billionaires. We don't have the support of wealthy proprietors or big business. We only have the support of people like you. So if you want to see more interviews like this, more coverage of goings on in the Green Party of England and Wales, in the Scottish Green Party, the Green Party of Northern Ireland, and indeed more coverage on social movements, the Labour movement, and much more, then please do set up a regular donation of £5 a month. You can do it at bright-green.org/donate. And it will help to fund this kind of content that hopefully you have enjoyed. There'll be links down below. So if you didn't catch me, you can find it there. So that's all we have for this evening. So thank you again so much for watching. Thanks to Duncan for joining us, and we will see you soon.